Hello, HitPoint friends. Jeremy and Andrew here with you today. We're going to be talking about WandaVision as it has come out this week at the time of this recording.
It's here, Jeremy. It's finally here.
It's
2020 was a really good year for Marvel Cinematic Universe content.
so
So,
good.
yeah, it's finally here. And what are we gonna do with this, Jeremy?
Oh, that's a great question. When it comes to this show, what are we going to do with this? As Andrew's referring to, in the year of 2020, for those who may have been under a rock, because who knows, with the way things 2020 were, you may have been under a rock.
I mean, we kind of were.
In a way. But there was no new Marvel content last year. While they came towards the end of 2019 after Spider-Man Far From Home, there's a lot of discussion that there would be so much stuff for 2020. And, due to COVID, all of it got delayed. So here we are, middle of January, Phase 4 officially kicking off for Marvel with a very unique show of WandaVision.
It is very unique. I was not prepared for how unique this show was going to be. I went into it pretty blind. And that is to say, I was literally blind. There was nothing on the screen. It was just all black. And I was like, this isn't a very good show. But then I realized I was blind and opened my eyes.
Yes, and I went in blind in an aspect as well. I think I only watched like the very first trailer for the show. And so
Yeah.
and even the things I saw leading up to it online, it's like, okay, everything seems very secretive about this show. So I have no idea what's going to happen. So episode 1. Episode 1 kicks off in a very weird way, all right off the bat. Where
It's one way to put it.
Yes, it pops in right off the bat of where you have an opening of a TV show with credits rolling for the show, like playing like the characters being in a show. Like it doesn't use the actors' names. It says WandaVision starring Wanda Maximoff and Vision, and goes through like what an opening sitcom opening would be with music in the background. Very much 50s feel, like I Love Lucy type of intro.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wrote down was I Love Lucy. Like this is a love letter to I Love Lucy, really.
Yep, and I would agree. And the format of the whole episode was that way. It starts off Vision and Wanda are moving into a new development of a house within a development, which they have a bunch of neighbors like in a lot of those 50 sitcoms, and they're a little quirky. They don't actually even remember how they got there or anything. They come and Wanda's in a wedding dress, and so they have just gotten married, but they don't remember where they got married or anything like that. So as you can tell, I do want to back up and say spoilers. Spoilers for sure abound in this whole episode or this whole video.
Yeah. I mean, the purpose of these things, we're going to recap the whole episode. Normally we're only going to cover one episode, but this one was special because they put out the first 2 episodes instead of just, one episode. Yeah.
So this whole first episode is very much of a
weird.
Well, it's weird, but it's very much a cliche 50s show. There's something that pops up in the humor of the characters don't know what's supposed to happen that day. Like they have a calendar that has a heart on it saying that this is an important day, but they have no idea what it means. And there's a bunch of speculation, and they have the whole husband-wife dynamic of like, do you remember? Do you remember? I remember, but I'm not going to tell you what it is type of dynamic. And then from there of workplace stuff with Vision and Wanda stuff at home with a neighbor, and it all comes down to they figure out Vision finds out at work, it is his boss coming over, and
the Hearts.
Yes, the Hearts, and that's the whole point is these two are coming together. The boss and his wife are coming over for dinner. And, of course, on Wanda's side, she thinks it's some kind of anniversary based off of the prompting of her friend, and plans this huge romantic thing. So just like a classic 50s form, boss and wife show up. Wife thinks it's a romantic evening, is dressed as it being a romantic evening. Everything's set up for a romantic evening, causes a very awkward situation and turmoil to ensue.
Yeah, it's a very classic 50s sitcom setup of that whole miscommunication thing between spouses and, all the crazy shenanigans that happen.
Yep. And so everything's very 50s for up to a point, all the way up through dinner and them eating. and then it takes a complete 180 turn.
Yeah, it
And
really ups the weird.
yes,
Although I will
and
say, this was probably my favorite part of the episode. Was just with
not
just how
surprising.
like yeah, with just how weird and creepy it got. Like it is, it's so bizarre. Like the Mr. Hart starts like choking on his food, and his wife, Mrs. Hart, just kind of like playfully starts out, oh, stop it, stop it. And she just keeps saying that while this guy's choking, and like he falls over on the floor choking, and like they've totally dropped the pretense of a 1950s sitcom. The style of shooting changes entirely to like
Mhm.
more of a modern, like a semi horror way of like shooting something, and it's so weird and comes out of nowhere.
Oh, it definitely, and it's just like because yeah, her stop it's eventually changed to be like to looking at Wanda, going, "Stop it, stop it, stop it,"
Yeah.
and she has Vision then go and use his abilities to take the food that he's choking on out of his throat, and
Yeah.
it was just like, what in the heck just happened?
Yeah.
And then everything continues on as normal. The boss gets
Yep.
up, and the wife, and they all are all happy and cheery, and they leave. And it's like, what?
Yeah, it's it's so odd. Like I was not expecting this at all. Like I think I kind of, and I'll be upfront. I actually didn't really enjoy this episode all that much, other than that, like other than two moments. One, that moment where it gets really weird and creepy, and the other moment being where Vision is playing "Old MacDonald Had a Farm" to the Hearts,
Yes, I
and
forgot
just
about that.
oh, it's so amazing. Like Mr. Hart is the guy who played, I think it's Saul from A Serious Man. Um and he's so deadpan just staring at him while Vision is just like really into playing Old MacDonald Had a Farm, and he's trying to get like any sort of animal from Mr. Hart, and he's Mr. Hart's just having none of it, and it's such an incredible moment of comedy that I did laugh at that. Most of the comedy is like that really 50s style of
Hmm.
comedy where it's more oh my wife and oh my husband type
Hmm.
of thing, where it's just like I wish they would have kind of subverted that a little bit more, but instead they just followed that exactly how they basically how they did in like actual 1950s sitcoms, and I wish they would have played a little bit more with that, but I'm hoping they'll expand on that a little bit more as episodes go on, and we'll hit on that I think with episode 2 a bit more. um but yeah, this was a bit of weird TV that I don't think I was mentally prepared for.
Yeah, and I mean, the big thing that happened at the end of episode one then was the reveal that someone is observing all of this.
Right.
They're like it goes into the end credits and it pans back and someone's watching it on a TV. There's a sword icon, so of course everyone's thinking it's the Sword Division from the comics, whatever that stands for. Don't know yet in the MCU, but that was the big reveal at the end. Was someone's observing this and someone's watching it. So I mean
Yeah.
that's the recap of episode one within itself.
Jeremy, the last thing I have to say about episode 1, it ends with 7 minutes of credits. I saw the runtime on Disney Plus. It's 30 minutes, and I was like, "Oh, cool." It's like a classic thing where it's 30 minutes. It's a 23-minute episode with 7 minutes of who are they kidding? 7 minutes of credits. Like, good on you for being on a professional production, but 7 minutes of credits is too many minutes of credits.
With no end credit scene.
No, there was no end credits. Ridiculous. Come on.
So my overall thoughts then on episode one really is that it did capture the 50s sitcom very well. As we've gone through the recap, I think that's quite obvious. Um, and the thing I found interesting is the dynamic that Wanda and Vision are about just as lost as the audience is. And they really don't know what's going on either, but they're just kind of going with it. And I feel like that's kind of like what they're telling us as the audience is you have no idea what this is and what's going on, but just go with it and just trust us because we're Marvel.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. This has me a little bit nervous about this TV show, because I didn't care for the sitcom-y shenanigans,
Mm.
but I found the weird, creepy stuff. Like that's where the show really hit. It's like the pitch that I was kind of thinking it might be going for, but wasn't sure. But when it finally hit there, I really liked that, and I'd like to see more of that in future episodes. And we sort of do, sort of don't in episode 2, but we'll get to that when we get to that.
Yep.
Um, but I'm a little nervous that we're gonna get a whole lot of setup and not a lot of payoff, because it
Mm,
felt like there was this episode was exclusively designed to make you ask questions about what's going on, but not provide any sort of answers, and that's got me a little nervous.
yeah, and I totally get that because that's I mean, with just the uncertainty of the show, where is it going? Like, we have no idea, and we'll get to that more of talking about theories and things in the future
Yeah.
because of the stuff that's out there about what this is connected to. But the one other thing I thought that was interesting of one of the big Easter eggs, if you want to call it, of this episode was, and it's in both episodes, they break at a time like normally, like you would in an old 50s show, of going away from the show and going to a commercial. And it's in this first episode, that commercial is a toaster made by Stark Industries. And so it's just, I'm kind of curious, what is that of a reference to? Because clearly it's a reference to something. I've read online that they said maybe it's a reference to Wanda and her brother, being the fact that when they were younger, the only thing that they saw when their whole town was being destroyed was a Stark bomb, like in front of them, and that we're just waiting for it to go off.
Mm.
So I read that, but I was also wondering, because some of the wording that they use in that ad, are they talking about Vision? Are they talking about Ultron? Like, what? Like, it's interesting because they definitely are putting in Easter egg type things as like a little wink to the audience of, yes, there's something askew here.
Yeah.
So now, episode 1 overall, I would agree, it's very much a build up episode. It's a beginning of it's a very good intro type of episode that you get from a TV show, but not a lot of depth or anything progressing with a plot to really have a clue what's going on. It's just like a random, in this case because of credits, 23-minute episode of old TV.
Yeah. And that's fine. It's
Mm,
fine. I need to know that they're gonna do something with this soon
mhm.
to really feel like I'll be okay with latching on to this as like something I really want to keep watching, rather than something that I feel like I have to keep watching to
Mhm.
eventually get answers.
So now we move on to episode 2. Episode 2 was kind of like a shift of, if you want to talk about like, here's my one thought, and I'll say this first because I think it
Yeah.
speaks into this. It almost seems like each of these episodes is going to progress through almost a decade
Yeah, I agree.
of TV, because
Yep.
episode 2 starts off with a new intro that's very 60s like instead of 50s. It's very inspired by Bewitched, and like directly like from Bewitched, the art style, where people, how they move, everything in the intro, it's animated, all of it is very much like Bewitched. And so that's how that one starts, and you even start to like, just the tone of it changes into more of a 60s style show, where it has a little bit of the 50s feel still, but it just has a little bit more of a drama that happens in the show, and some goofy
Yeah.
things that happen because of some other things. So I mean, it all starts off with Wanda and Vision are back in their house, which I don't know if I missed it, but I was pretty sure in the second episode their layout of their house
Oh, it's
changed,
completely different. Yeah.
because there
No, I
were no
I saw that
stairs in the
too.
first episode.
Yeah. Yeah, it's completely different.
And so I was like, that's weird. So the whole house changed between episodes. And then Wanda's wearing totally different kinds of clothes that are more modern, actually, which was kind of made her really stick out, while
Yeah.
Vision's still in kind of the right era type of clothing. But it all starts off with Vision's practicing a magic show. And it's because there's a talent show going to be happening in town, and they know that they might be appeared as kind of quirky and weird in this town, so they're trying to give a reason for that and make them not seem so odd and try to fit in. So that's the whole premise of this episode,
Yeah.
is they're doing a magic show for a talent show that takes place later on, and then there's a
Yeah.
bunch of random things that happens between there.
Yeah.
Of
Oh, and periodically there are these big like thumping noises.
Mhm.
It does open up there's like some thumping noises, and it's played as like, oh, there's just a branch hitting the window, but there's kind of
Mhm.
this implication that there might be something more to it.
Yeah, and that implication comes out not that long into the episode when Vision goes off to go to this neighborhood watch meeting at the library, and Wanda's supposed to be going to this like get together with all these ladies in the neighborhood. And when she goes outside, she like there's that noise that you're talking about, and she finds a helicopter in the bushes, like a toy helicopter, but it's in color because
Hmm.
this episode's still in black and white. So this is when
Yeah,
you start to get a little bit of that Pleasantville feel coming into the show, where oh wow, something so dynamic because it's red. It was red and yellow, and it had that
yeah,
sword icon that you saw in the first episode on it. And so she picks that up and looking at it, and that's kind of like your
yeah,
first hint of another thing of like, okay, something bigger is going on here. And so she leaves and goes with her friend to this meeting with the ladies, which has the general dynamic of like you have the one stuck up neighborhood rich lady who looks down on everybody else. That's typical in some of these shows. And that kind of stuff goes on. She meets another person and starts developing a relationship with not relationship but a friendship with this other character. And so that's going on with Wanda while Vision is off at the library, and he goes into this meeting that's like a boys' club type thing where they really don't take any of this stuff seriously of trying to make the neighborhood safe. And there's some comedic things, interaction there. And then Vision's offered a piece of big red gum. and, and he of course says, well, I don't eat food before that, and
yeah,
like everyone's like, what? And he's like, oh, between meals I don't eat food.
yeah,
But so they give him some gum, and it gums up his mechanics inside, which they show, and of course a old 60s animated style of
yeah.
gumming up his gears, which ends up creating what I would call a drunk Vision.
Well, it was like not even drunk Vision; it was drunk Paul Bettany.
Yes, and I'll get to that when we talk about our thoughts about the
Right.
episode. Um, but yeah, it was like okay, so that happened, and that leads to some chaos at the talent show with their magic show they're going to do because Vision not being all there starts doing things that would reveal that they have abilities, and
Yeah,
so Wanda has to use her abilities to make all of the to reveal how Vision's doing all these magic acts.
yeah. Like he's flying. He's lifting up a piano with one hand. Like he's going
Mhm.
full on superpowers.
Yep. And it's so Wanda makes it look like he's on a rope and then makes the piano be a cardboard cutout and all these
Hmm.
things. And it is humorous. So all that happens. And then uh, there was another scene prior where someone cut their hand and it actually showed the
Yeah,
blood. And that was
yeah.
another thing that's like, oh, wow. It was very stunning in that way of
Yeah,
how they
like the
did
blood
it.
is in color and
Yep.
everything else is still black and white, one of those selective color moments. So
Yep.
clearly meant to be a moment of some import for the series, I would assume.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, so everyone loves the magic show that attended, while Wanda and Vision were concerned that they were gonna like hate them now. Everyone loved it. They go home. Everyone's excited, and uh, big shocker. There's two things that happen. One, some random guy comes out of the sewer in a beekeeper suit.
Yep.
Um, there's a lot of speculation on what that could mean, and
Yeah.
this is what we get: two big reveals within about a 3 minute span. One, we find out that Wanda has some kind of control in this universe because she says she sees this beekeeper thing and starts freaking out and is like saying no, 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 and it rewinds back to prior to that of when they were back in the house, and it's like nothing ever happened. So that was the first reveal, and after doing that rewind, the second reveal is all of a sudden Wanda's pregnant.
Yeah. And not just pregnant, like several months
Yes,
pregnant.
several months pregnant. Oh, and
Yeah.
then the third thing after that is all of a sudden everything in the world turns to color,
Yes.
just like in
Very.
Pleasantville.
Yeah. Yeah, very like everything just does this big magical reveal and it's all back in color, very 60s looking color. It's a nice it's a neat little touch. Another
Mhm.
one of those kind of love letter moments to old sitcoms. So we did forget to mention though, there is another like commercial interlude, like an in sitcom commercial interlude for this watch, and the watch I think is named after like some guy that shows up in one of the MCU endeavors. I don't remember if he was actually in a movie or in kind of like one of those side stories, like an Agents of Shield thing. But on the face of the watch that they show, you can see there's like a little Hydra logo on there. That was the one thing I really noticed with that.
Yeah, and that actually is it's Baron von Strucker was who they mentioned.
Right, Strucker. Yep.
And he is in Age of Ultron. He's the person that took Wanda and her brother and was doing the testing on them to give them their abilities using the Mind Stone. So yeah, so that's I've caught that too. I was like, I was like von Strucker watches. Oh, Baron von Strucker. Okay, so
Yeah.
another reference to of like, okay, something trying to give in. And there's one other thing we also forgot that was a pretty big thing as well. At one point, Wanda is talking to someone and the radio's playing.
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden you start like it's playing Help Me Rhonda, the song Help Me Rhonda, and the name starts changing to Wanda. And then you start hearing someone saying, Wanda, who's doing this to you? Wanda, who's doing this to you? Couldn't tell whose voice it was. I'm still not quite sure because that's how the episode ended as well. As the credits are starting to roll, is that someone saying Wanda, who's doing this to you? And so it's like, okay, somebody on the outside is trying to get her up. And so we'll definitely have to share our thoughts on that. But what were your overall thoughts on episode 2?
So overall thoughts on episode 2 continued to make me nervous. Like I felt they embraced more of those moments of like acknowledging that there's kind of this outside world that's trying to look into like this in-universe show, if you want to call it that. And so that I thought was positive. But I kind of got this like it's very weird. It's like if you've ever watched a show that's run by Stephen Moffat, who used to run Doctor Who, he ran Sherlock, he ran the Dracula series, all on the BBC. It's like watching a show run by Stephen Moffat if Stephen Moffat was bad at running shows, and Stephen Moffat is not good at running shows. It feels like it's trying to set up a lot of interesting questions, but which is something Stephen Moffat is really good at doing, but he's also pretty good usually at writing the episodes too. And I didn't really feel like I was watching an episode of TV that was about like characters who had some like growth or some sort of development. And I'm really worried, and this might start to get a little bit into the theories here. I'm really worried that this is essentially this is all in Wanda's head kind of thing, this whole show, and that the show is basically going to end with her waking up. And if that happens, I'm going to get very upset because I'm going to be like, why does any of this matter? So like, I want to see this show matter, and I'm hoping that episode 3 gives me a reason for it to matter.
And I would agree with that because from a overall episode, looking at the episode itself on its own, I was entertained. I will say that I was entertained by it compared to the first episode. There was more plot progression, more questions to be brought to the audience to start asking. Paul Bettany with the whole thing with chewing the gum and getting stuck. I wrote down as a note of like, it's kind of like, I'll say when he gets to the magic show and how he's acting during that whole thing, I was like, it's kind of like Paul Bettany's playing his character from the movie A Knight's Tale.
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah.
This is kind of funny because he's basically acting like a drunk and like he has in a lot of other stuff, and especially in A Knight's Tale. And just talking like that. And it's like Paul Bettany's finally getting to be Paul Bettany in a Marvel show. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that has shocked me the most so far through just not episode 1, but especially episode 2, is that most of the humor is coming from the Vision character. And I find that to be really cool because the fact Vision has just been kind of this robotic character through all the movies. And so to see a more dynamic of that character where he actually does have a personality, That's fun to me, and it was
Yeah.
entertaining just to see that from a character perspective. But yeah, at the same time, it's just there are so many questions right now still with this show, and like it's I don't feel any different than when I did before I watched it, and so it's within this episode, it's just like I agree with you. It's like, okay, now that they've put things to color, what's next? What are they going to do? So
Yeah.
I think that's really it's when we talk about now of like theories and we talk about just our overall thoughts on the show as a whole so far. I mean, that's really I think is for me sums it up is okay. Still have no clue what's going on. Have no idea what the show's really completely about yet. I'm intrigued enough to at least watch another episode to see what's the next step. But man, they better start giving us some answers in some kind of
Yeah.
capacity to make me think, not feel like I'm wasting my time.
Right. And that's my exact fear
Mm,
is basically Stephen Moffat syndrome where you keep thinking he asks these big, really big like, "Ooh, I wonder what's going to happen" questions. Maybe you'll find out in the next episode and you just never do, which is why I stopped watching Doctor Who
mm,
in the middle of season 6. But it's why I stopped watching it anyways just
mm,
because I was tired of just sort of having the carrot dangled in front of me and like I wanted a bite of something.
yeah.
So I'm hoping that within the next couple episodes, we're going to start actually getting some bites, um, and we'll start to see why this show construct matters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I have two kind of big theories about the series. One that I think is kind of where they're going, and one that's a bit more outlandish. And I'll start with the outlandish one. So I'm thinking that this is going to be kind of like a face-off situation where
Mm-hmm.
these two characters have to switch their identities and then fight each other. I never actually saw Face Off, so I don't know if that's what happened in the movie. But I'd like to imagine that's certainly a possibility for this to happen. I think the more realistic theory is that, as you mentioned, every episode is going to kind of progress through various years of sitcom history.
Mm,
And like I said, my fear is that it's going to end with her like basically once these modern times meet up with each other, that's where we're going to have Wanda wakes up from the stream or that's where the moment of like okay, this is the end and we're finally like Wanda somehow brought out of this, Vision is somehow brought out of this. I'm not really sure. I don't know if Vision is actually alive because he could not be resurrected. Um,
mm-hmm.
in Endgame because he wasn't part of the snapping as I like to call it,
Mm-hmm.
but he was actually killed by Thanos before that. Um, so I don't know if Vision's actually going to like come out alive from this show, but I'm almost certain Wanda will, and um, I wonder where they'll go with that.
Yeah, and that's where my theories kind of go different direction of because they have said this is supposed to lead into the next Doctor Strange movie, which we know is called the Multiverse of Madness, is the fact that we have in the second episode someone is saying Wanda who's doing this to you makes me wonder if maybe Wanda's in a comatose state for some reason and being tested on, and
Hmm.
will those testings and everything, which yes maybe this is all in her head, but maybe it actually triggers something where she starts creating alternate universes that actually start impacting the world. Like that's kind of my theory, is that maybe it will be the fear that you have, that it is all in her head, but there's actually going to have a direct implication on it, and maybe that's how Vision would even be able to come back, as she brings in a alternate version of him. Or it could be that this is not in her head and that she has created an alternate universe
Mm.
that is people that has she has unintentionally brought other people into, um, and that's why she can't remember where she came from, because maybe there's some kind of memory wipe type thing along with all that, of and that's going to be what we figure out going forward. But I mean, that's the whole thing with the show. There's just so much unknown still. There's just so much that you just have no idea what's going to happen. But I will say this from a planning aspect: there are 9 episodes for this show. They were very. I do not think it was a mistake that they released the two that they did on released on the first day. The fact that both of them are in black and white, and the second one ends with going to color, I think that was a specific choice to put out both episodes on the same day, because I think there will be a shift and the tone of the show going forward. And so these two really do go well together. And I think I think that's because we are gonna see a change come next week,
Mm.
and things are going to start being different that will make it to where the first two really stand out as being like their own thing in comparison to the rest of the show.
Mm.
That's my
Mm.
thought, at least.
No, I think that's a good thought. Yeah. Yeah, I'm hoping we do see that shift. That's what I'm really hoping for, because the stupid thing to do from a storyteller's perspective would be to end the series with Wanda waking up and there being really no actual consequences, and we're just setting up the interesting story bit. So I'm trusting in these showrunners to actually be truthful in saying this is the interesting story that we want to stick around for.
Yeah, what show was it that was how it ended, and there was a big uproar back in the
Oh
day
gosh.
of where someone woke
Oh.
up and like that's how it ended, was someone woke up and all of it was a dream.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's its own trope for,
Yes.
for a reason. Like, so many bad authors do that, and it never makes anyone happy. Never. It has never satisfied anyone. So I am sure, like, Marvel has got their storytelling down pretty well. So I'm sure they won't do that. I'm just a little afraid that they will.
Yeah.
Oh shoot.
It's weird. The show is weird.
Yeah.
That's the greatest way to put it. Is it's unique,
Yeah.
and it's weird, and it's like it's not like anything else that Marvel has done. And I
Yeah,
think, and that's what makes me think of like I have a little bit of trust with them, because every time they've done something that's so dynamically different than what they've done before, they end up knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, and that's what I do want to say in favor of the show, is just how weird it is. Like, they're taking a pretty big storytelling risk with this to do something completely different, completely not out of tone of the normal MCU stuff, but it is you just would not peg this to be in the same universe as, say, like the Avengers. Like, they're just two very different styles of storytelling. So it's really cool to see Marvel betting on something that's a little bit different.
So overall thoughts, I think we've said it multiple times. It's a very weird, unique show. I'd say it's worth watching these episodes if you haven't watched them already. I feel bad if you haven't watched them already and you sat through this whole thing, because there's no point that you should have done that. Title said there were spoilers. Don't watch this show episode. Don't watch this video without watching the show. But it's just one of those where I will say this: I'm glad that there's Marvel content back. Like above and beyond, above all else, being weird, being unique, being different, not sure where things are going. I'm just glad to see something Marvel back at this point. And it's one of those where it's like, I love movies and TV. I'm reading a book about why people like movies and TV right now. That just shows you how much I like them. So it's one of those where I look at just going like, it gives me more hope for 2021 now that we have Marvel stuff back.
Yeah. It's comforting to have it back again.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think that sums up of the first two episodes of WandaVision. We will be back next week with our recap on episode 3, so check that out. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button if this is your first time watching. Definitely appreciate the support. And don't forget, guys, keep an eye on your health bar. Thank you so much for tuning into HitPoint. We hope this refilled your health bar and gave you a much-needed mental break. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to click the logo that's over my face. Or if you want more content, click here or here.